So, a little bit of cool backstory on Sarah is that I set up a bit of a charity boot camp at Langdale Park earlier this year, and all proceeds went to the Alberta Cancer Foundation. And Sarah helped me out a lot. She collaborated with me, and her friends and family donated a lot of money towards that fundraiser. We raised about $600. We had 6 attendees, and we were looking at raising $20 per person. So if you put together the math, we had a lot of silent donators, and we had a lot of people that donated beyond what we asked of them to do, and it was pretty cool. And it takes a very special person to collaborate on an initiative like that, so I was honored to have her on my podcast. Hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Lifestyle Chase, Season 2. This podcast features high performers who have found a way to live their best life while balancing their health, wellness, friends, and family. I'm your host, Chris Little. Let's get started. The Lifestyle Chase is brought to you by Yeg Fitness. Yeg Fitness is Edmonton, Alberta, Canada's healthy lifestyle community, creating and supporting active living for all. Check them out online at yegfitness.ca and on social media at yegfitness. So, welcome to episode 65 of The Lifestyle Chase. I am joined today by Sarah Lindquist. Did I get that right?
You did get that right.
Yeah! So how are you doing today?
I'm really well. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
You fed me coffee. That's always a bonus.
Always. You gotta get that coffee in the morning before your day goes.
Totally. So I know you do a lot of spin classes. You ride at Cycle Bar a lot, but like what's like a typical morning for you?
So a typical morning for me usually starts at Cycle Bar. I used to teach yoga in the mornings quite a bit, but I was so busy with my schedule and really not just taking time for self-care for myself. So I took a step back from my morning classes and decided to dedicate that time for myself for spin or just some sort of self-care, and that it just ended up happening to be spin. So yeah, every weekday morning I'm on the spin bike, which is really good, and that just kind of is an outlet for me to work through whatever it was that's been going on in my day or my week or what have you. So yeah, that's how I start my day. Come home, I usually have a coffee, go out with my dog who is at the dog park right now. And then, yeah, I usually head out to my classes to teach. If I have yoga classes or kinesiology clients, I'll see them. And then I usually get some time off in the afternoon too to come back and take Tukka out for, again, a little bit of a jaunt or whatever it is that I have to do, get some work done. And I'm teaching usually every weeknight evening as well. So it's a nice little balance of work play throughout my day.
That's good balance.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing about being a dog owner? Your favorite 5 things?
Oh God, my favorite 5 things. Well, number 1 is definitely coming home. Like every time I come home, whether I've been away for 5 minutes or 5 hours, it's just the amount of love and excitement that Tukka has for me every time I come home, which is really, really amazing. Just seeing his love for like my family and my friends too, it's amazing. Like I don't have kids of my own, and so for my parents, my dog is their grand fur baby, what they like to call it as. So it's nice to see them interacting. Like my parents were never really, we had dogs growing up, but we always lived on a farm, so they were outside dogs, a different dynamic. So it's really funny watching my dad and my dog play, because anyways, that's really cool. Just being able to go on a lot of adventures with my dog. Like we're really outdoorsy. We like to do a lot of hiking, and when we can, granted with my schedule. So just being able to share in on the activities and the fun, and just seeing how much fun he has. Like we take him camping every single year, and he loves being outside. So it's kind of neat. Like you kind of find your best friend in this creature that you can't communicate or talk to verbally, but yet they know exactly what you're trying to communicate with them most of the time. And it's just a really cool dynamic. Was that 4?
3 things.
3?
2 more.
Okay, 2 more. Another really cool thing is Oh, when I'm like when I'm sick, my dog can pick up on my energy, or like if I'm having a really bad day, like he is so cognizant of the energy that I'm putting out, and he responds to that so well. Like if I'm sick and just kind of lying on the couch, not wanting to do much, he'll come over and lick my hand or smell me and then just lay down beside me, just kind of showing that he's there, which is really, really neat. So he's really like, it's really supportive in a way to have a dog. And then the last thing, what else is really great about having a dog? Just, I suppose, the experiences that I get to have with him too. Like since I've had a dog, like it really forces you to go outside and explore different parts of the city that you would never tend to maybe go out and explore. Like since I've gotten Tukka, like I've really gotten to know the River Valley system, and Edmonton, we are so lucky to have the trail system that we do, and it's utilized by quite a few people, but there's a large population that doesn't even realize the trails and the system that we have. So it's a really cool way to kind of experience our city on a little bit of a different level. Kind of makes you dig down a little bit deeper for those hidden gems.
So what inspired his name?
Tukka Rask, the goalie from Boston. Yeah.
I like that.
I grew up in a really big hockey family, and so always watching hockey growing up, I remember seeing Tukka Rask and being like, that'd make a really good name for a dog one day. So then I got a dog 3.5 years ago, and that was his name. As soon as I saw him, I'm like, Tukka, that's it.
Was there a light bulb moment to getting a dog? Was it just something that happened? You're like, okay, I need a dog now?
Yeah, so we always grew up with dogs. I grew up on farms and acreages, so we had outside dogs growing up. And so when we moved towns and moved into town, my dad and my brother are allergic, so we weren't allowed, or we couldn't have indoor dogs anymore, or dogs at all anymore. So I grew up the rest of middle and high school without a dog, and which was fine. Went on to post-secondary, and then once I finished university and kind of got settled into my own, I was like, timing is good. Let's do something. So yeah, just ended up rescuing Tukka from just a farm outside of Beaumont, and I'm so happy that I did, because he's been like a saving grace to me ever since.
And he's so well trained too.
Thank you for saying that. It was a long process, and it's still a process. He has his days just like we all do. But because we did rescue him from a farm, we didn't really know a lot about his past, didn't see his parents or anything, and he was really, really sick when we got him. So it took a lot of time and a lot of patience and love just to kind of get him healthy first of all, and then also get him accustomed to other people, like males. He was very, very wary of males, so I don't really know what happened before that, or before we got him, to make him that anxious. But and he still has, like, he'll still be a little bit wary the first couple of minutes he meets somebody, but as soon as you show him that you're not a bad person, you give him some treats or some love, and he's your best friend. So yeah, it's really, really lucky to have him.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So growing up in a rural community and moving to an urban community, you did that like midway through junior high?
Yeah, I grew up in a little town called Elk Point. That's about 2 hours east of Edmonton, and that's where both of my parents were born and raised, and they met. They were high school sweethearts and everything. So I had a lot of family that lived there, and when I was going into grade 6, I believe, was when we moved. My dad got a job promotion or a job transfer that took us to Edson. So not necessarily an urban community, but just a little less rural than Elk Point. So Edson was where I grew up and went to middle school and high school, graduated there. And then after that, I went to Red Deer College for 2 years, started my degree, and then finished up at the U of A.
Cool. Mm-hmm. So a lot of different like atmospheres or like communities. What did each one teach you? We'll start with Elk Point, then Edson, then Red Deer.
Yeah, so Elk Point was kind of like, that's like where my roots are, right? Like my family is still there. My parents actually, since I was in university, my dad got another job transfer that took him back to Elk Point. So my parents have kind of gone full circle. So that's where they are right now. So I consider that my home. That's where I have a lot of really, really fond memories with my family and a lot of my early childhood friends who I'm still friends with to this day. So that living there, we lived in a farm and an acreage. It taught me a lot about compassion and just how to care not only for others, I have a younger brother, but also for animals as well. So learning the respect and the responsibility that comes along with all of that at a really young age. I think I was really fortunate to have that experience. And then when we moved to Edson, that was when I was a little bit older, starting to get a little bit more academic and more into sports. And so it was different. It taught me living there to grow a backbone, and it taught me that not everybody is going to be on your side. And so that you need to stick up for yourself and you need to be your own cheerleader. So Edson was a really good learning experience. I have a lot of really good friends that I still keep in touch with that don't necessarily live there, but we all went to school together. So that was a really cool experience growing up and living there. And then when I moved to university, I just kept on growing.
Cool. I found that, so I grew up in a rural community, and then I moved to Edmonton. It was I learned so much different empathy being just surrounded by different scenarios, different people, more people, higher volume of people. And you just you realize that if you're not in a culturally diverse, community, you don't get it. And some things that you say are just completely garbage.
Absolutely.
Did you ever encounter that?
Yeah. So in Elk Point, it's a very Caucasian community, very Ukrainian. I'm related probably to half the town. So we didn't have a lot of diversity there, and Edson was very, very similar. We weren't very diverse. Everybody kind of knew everybody, and so the language that I grew up with, and you don't know what you don't know at the time, but the language that you're surrounded by there. Sometimes you think, well, that's interesting that person said that, or, oh, I've never thought of saying that to some person. But then you move to a bigger community such as Red Deer or Edmonton, and you are surrounded by that diversity, and you realize really, really quickly how close-minded some people can be. And it may not be that's because that's how they want to be, but it just might be a lack of education. They just don't know like I said, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so, and especially being in the profession that I'm in, and being with so many populations and so many different types of people from different backgrounds, you have to be very, very cognizant of what you're saying and how you say it to people, because people take things so differently these days that you have to be very, very conscientious of your words.
Well, and I even, nobody is the same. And sometimes we kind of have it framed that everybody should be a certain way, everybody should fit a certain box, but even two people that look identical aren't going to fit the same box. And if you're drawing the line based on preconceptions of what a person what person relates to and what doesn't, you're missing out on so much in life, from personal development, from a community standpoint, stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting that you say that, because a lot of the people that still are in these communities that I went to school with and graduated with that are still living there tend to be doing the same things. They're kind of stuck in those old habitual patterns and ways. And so when you go on and you grow and do a lot of work to change for the better for yourself, sometimes people see that as being fake, or they don't understand because they're still stuck in that same old mindset. So it can be a little bit of a tricky thing to start to learn to realize that sometimes you need to let that go and realize that what you're doing and changing for the better is growth, and it's necessary for change for you if you want to advance anyway. But it can be hard to let go of those old people or those old habitual patterns or ways of thinking when that's what you're used to for so long.
Absolutely. What inspired you to go into kinesiology?
Well, I always knew that I wanted to do something with sport. We grew up in a very active family. My brother he played hockey and went pretty far with it. And I was a dancer and played volleyball all throughout high school. So always knew I wanted to do something in regards to sport. And actually my brother had a big part of why I wanted to go into kinesiology. As he was going through his hockey career, he's a goalie and he's very, very talented. He ended up getting drafted. I think he was in the third round for, I can't remember, something in the Bantam draft. He was one of the highest goalies ever drafted by the Prince George Cougars. And so it was a really big honor, and he was really, really young. And so he got to go up and play, and I got to see him as he was going through all of that, and it was incredible. He was playing really, really well, but the team wasn't doing so well at the time. And because of that, Brett started to develop some negative mental habits and thinking patterns, and just so seeing him starting to go through all of this, and as he was doing so, he was recommended to go see a sports psychologist. And then so seeing the change that had on my brother, and just how big of an impact that had, and the whole mindset of it, was really kind of what pushed me to want to go and start to pursue that a little bit more. So when I went to Red Deer, I did my first 2 years in health and fitness promotion in the kinesiology program. So I became a personal trainer, and I really enjoyed that for a little while, but I knew that wasn't for me. So then when I went up to the U of A and transferred there, I started to specialize more in the sport and health psychology side of things. So I took a bunch of classes and courses and found that to be really, really interesting. And so graduated in 2013 with my degree, and took a year off. I was planning on applying to go back for my master's, but in that time I had taken my yoga teacher training, and then that's kind of where this all stemmed from. So of course the life changed a little bit, but I am so happy that I took my kinesiology, and I have that because it has opened so many doors for me, and just given me a really good foundational knowledge of the body and how movement works and why it's so important. And that's what I apply quite a bit in my classes, whether that's yoga or bar or what have you.
What was your very first yoga class like? Can you remember?
Yeah. So back in, oh gosh, I would have been like 14, 13, I can't, like 2005, we were in Edson, and there was a yoga instructor that would come from Edmonton, and we didn't have a yoga studio in the town at the time. And so this lady was doing it in the school gymnasium, which was in like this dirty old basement of the school. And so my mom and I went, I think it was like an 8 or a 10 week thing. And so that was my very first taste of yoga, and I loved it. It was the movement came so naturally to me. Like I was 14, I was super bendy, I was a dancer, it flowed. And so for me at that time, yoga was purely about the poses. I didn't know anything else about it. I just thought, oh, if I can put my body in this shape, it's easy, I'm good at this, let's do it. But after that course ended, she ended up not coming back. I don't know why. But there was no YouTube at the time. There was no Instagram or anything. There wasn't any way to continue on. So I would rent books from the library and practice in my room. And from that, I can almost guarantee that was why I developed so many negative, not negative, but incorrect ways of building up my practice, like these compensation patterns that I developed, and just I wasn't properly engaging my core. I was 14, I had no idea how to engage my core. So I was able to put myself in these positions, but in a very unsustainable way. So when I finally got to university in my second semester of my first year, I took an Ashtanga yoga course as one of my electives. And that was where I really started to learn about the other limbs of yoga and how it is so much more than just the shape of the posture and the way that we can move our bodies. And so from there, that was also when I realized these alignment issues that were going on within my body too. So I was practicing on and off from about 15 up until 18 or 19, but then it wasn't until I was in university when I really started to dive into my yoga practice beyond the postures.
So in the last 7 days, name one thing that you are the most proud of.
In the last 7 days, I am most proud of taking time for myself I finally had a weekend off from teaching, which is very, very rare. And so I said no to a few things that usually I would have said yes to because they were really fun and it would have been a great time. But it's just, I've been so busy over the past couple of months developing workshops and doing all of these things for others that when I find I have a chance to take time for myself, I take it. So I was really proud of myself. I taught bar on Friday night. I went to a yoga class for myself. I was a student. I went to a yoga class on Saturday morning. I went to a spin class on Saturday morning. I ate a delicious brunch. I took my dog out. Like I did me. And that's not something that I get to do very often. So I was really, really grateful to myself for taking that time, because if I didn't consciously carve that time out, I would have let it pass, or I would have filled it up with work or what else to be productive. And I say that in quotations. But being productive isn't always about producing work or making something, right? Sometimes being productive is about taking time for yourself and producing that space for yourself to cultivate a sense of calm and inner well-being.
I like that. In the last 12 months, what is a time when you felt the most self-doubt?
Right before I got onto the plane for Central America in, when did I leave? March? End of March. So I have a terrible fear of flying, and I am literally the biggest baby when it comes to fly. Like so I got dropped off at the airport, and literally before I even walked into the airport, I thought, I could just go to a hotel in Leduc and stay for a month and nobody would even know that I'm gone. And I seriously considered that for about 3 minutes. I stood outside and then I was like, oh my God, no, Sarah, like you need to go in. But in those 3 minutes, I had more self-doubt about myself and more fear, I think, than I have had in a really, really long time. And I know this fear of flying is totally irrational, but it's something that I can't control, and I've tried to. Like I do breathing exercises, I try meditations, I try all of these different things. I've seen my doctor about it, but it's just this fear that I have. And so thankfully the nicest WestJet lady came out and tapped me on the shoulder and said, honey, are you okay? And she could see my face. I'm like, no, I'm not. So she walked me through everything. I was literally holding my hand like this nice little grandma. And so she was a really, really big part of me getting over it. And once I got on the plane, honestly, I was fine. It was a night flight. Like I passed out. I woke up the next morning. I was in Costa Rica. Life was great. But in those 3 to 5 minutes of just kind of standing up there and thinking, oh my God, like I don't think I can do this. I had never traveled alone. I had never been on an airplane alone. And it was just the fear of the unknown. So yeah, that for me probably would have been my biggest moment of self-doubt over this last year.
So was it just Costa Rica that you went to, or?
No, so I just actually flew in and out of Costa Rica. I was in Nicaragua for about 3 weeks, doing some volunteering down there. I was in San Juan del Sur, and I was at a surf camp / hostel, and so I was teaching yoga there every day, as well as working with some of the local kids and youth that are living there. It was the really cool thing about this surf camp that I was at was that it's essentially like an after school program for some of the local kids that are in less than ideal situations. And so they come to the surf camp and we do activities with them and games. None of them speak English. And so we're teaching them English using flashcards and some things like values and words. And then I was starting to teach them a little bit of yoga as well. So I started to develop a little bit of a yoga lesson that the teacher could continue on with the kids once I was done. So that was really, really cool. So I was in Costa Rica for about 3 weeks, and then I had an opportunity to come back down Nicaragua, for 3 weeks. And I had an opportunity to come back down to Costa Rica for the last, I think 10 days of my trip. So I did that and just headed out to the jungle and did some hiking and did a bunch of yoga and again, just did me. And it was amazing.
That sounds like an awesome trip.
Yeah.
What are the 3 most influential interactions you had over the span of that trip?
3 of the most influential interactions. So one of the biggest ones was with one of the little girls that I was teaching, or that I was working with, that was part of the after school program, and she didn't speak English. And she lived, actually, her mom worked at the surf camp as a cook, and they lived in just this little hut in the back behind the surf camp. And one of the nights, the mom had asked me to switch out. She asked me to come and switch out. They had a fan in one of the dorms that was broken, so they were going to take that fan and put it into their house and bring that house fan in. And so the girl was trying to communicate. She was pulling on my shirt and was trying to get me to come. I had never seen where they lived before, and I opened up the door, and it was just like my jaw dropped. It was so incredible to see the space that this family of 5 lives in, which is no bigger than my kitchen that we're sitting in right now. And it was just to see that, and this girl, and I could tell that she didn't want to do what her mom was asking. She wanted to play, and so she brought me over to where her part of the house was and showed me her toys, showed me her doll, and then she wanted me to sit down and play with her, so I did. And then before we got up and left, she gave me the biggest hug. And I remember almost letting go, and she squeezed harder, and that it melted me, because obviously that girl needed the affection and needed the love. So after that, every day that I saw her, she would just come and give me these big hugs and say Sara, and come in. So that was probably the biggest thing. I'm not huge on kids, but I don't know, the love that she had. I thought I was going to bring a dog back home from Central America, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll bring this little girl back home with me instead. So she was really, I think about her a lot. She was just such a sweet little one. Another really cool interaction I got to have when I was there was meeting one of the yoga instructors in Costa Rica, in La Fortuna, the town that I stayed in. She was really interesting woman, born and raised in Costa Rica, moved to the United States to do some training. Her dad lived there, so she had a dual citizenship. And so just getting her perspective on life and living in Costa Rica versus living in the United States, and just how her upbringing was and the values that she brought throughout her classes and taking her classes too. It was really, I always find it really interesting to take other teachers' classes and kind of knowing a little bit about them, and just seeing how that plays into how they theme their classes and how they style their style of teaching. And so I learned a lot from her. She came from a very compassionate, a very empathetic state, so it was really interesting. Her space was just filled with so much love and kindness, and you could feel that as soon as you walked into the doors. It was just oozing with love. And so that was a space I spent, I think, almost every single day that I was in La Fortuna. I went to her studio and practiced with her, because she was just so wonderful. And then the last really cool experience I had was when I was in Nicaragua at the surf camp. There was a group of girls my first week that I was there, and we were all from different spaces. There was another girl from Canada. She was from Ottawa. There's 2 girls from the Netherlands, 3 girls from the Netherlands, sorry. 2 were traveling together, and 1 was traveling solo. Another girl from the UK, and all of us just clicked. We all sat down at the table the first night, and we were all just chatting, and by the end of the night or the next morning, it was like we had known each other for forever. And so we still keep in touch to this day. We all have this big WhatsApp conversation. We'll send each other memes and pictures and talk shit about whoever, and it's really cool. So it was really interesting. You can be traveling alone and not know what you're going to experience, and yet make these amazing friendships that have the potential to last a lifetime. So I think those are probably 3 of the most influential experiences, that I had when I was there.
So when you're talking about things and people that click and these moments where it's oh wow, we really connect. What is it that defines that for you?
I think just being in the same mindset, having the same kinds of values, and not necessarily coming from the same backgrounds, because we're all different, but just having the same values. Everybody that I was traveling with, nobody cared about what you looked like. Nobody cares about the material side of things, which I really respect. We live here in North America and Canada. We live in a culture, in a society where everything is instant, everything is automatic, and it's all on our devices, whether that be our cell phones or our laptops or our tablets or what have you. And it's so impersonal. But when you go down to a country where the Wi-Fi is very limited, if there's anything at all, you're forced to have those face-to-face interactions, which is so rare in our society these days. And so when you have those interactions with people and you get to know them and you get to see what they actually believe and you get to hear what their values are, and it's just, you feel a sense of fulfillment way beyond the gratification that we get instantly from social media messaging or DMs or whatever, right? So I really value people who value my values, and I value people who make me think in different ways. I really like seeing different sides of things, because we all have our own perspectives, but those can be so limited based on our experiences and the way that we grew up and our beliefs that were instilled into us. And so when you meet people from different cultures and different societies and you get to hear their side of things, you kind of think, oh, I haven't thought of it that way before. Oh, that's an interesting perspective. And then, so I really appreciate people's honesty and authenticity in showing me those different perspectives.
I like that. So in the last decade, what's been a moment that's challenged your core values the most?
So when I was working my kinesiology job full time, it was an amazing position. I had the opportunity to work in people's homes if they were in different facilities, such as like long-term care spaces or extended care hospitals. I got to go into those spaces and do physiotherapy with them. So it was a really, really rewarding job, because it was populations that couldn't maybe necessarily get to physio clinics on their own. A lot of limited range of motion, a lot of people with strokes or heart attacks, knee replacements, hip replacements, what have you. And so I really loved the work. I loved my clients. I loved going in every day and seeing the difference that you were making for people. And it might not be those big gains that you see people lifting in the gym, but okay, this person can walk up their flight of stairs without being in pain. That's amazing. How functional is that for them, being able to live independently in their home for that much longer? Like, that's incredible. That's literally changing people's lives. And so I really, really loved my job, but there was a lot of things behind the scenes that just weren't clicking. There was a lot of miscommunications, and the values were changing. As it started to franchise out, I noticed the intention behind why we were doing what we were doing was shifting, and it was turning towards that more financial aspect, which is fine, but that just doesn't resonate with me. And so I was really, really torn between, do I stay in this position that I love, but yet I was coming home every day miserable, and I was taking my work home with me, and I couldn't separate the two, and I was always on, and I was never saying no, because I wanted to show up for everybody all the time, and I was so disconnected internally that I didn't know what to do. I felt really, really lost. And so I had already taken my yoga teacher training by then. And I had an opportunity to teach a little bit more. And so it was a really tricky thing deciding to make the switch from doing my kinesiology full-time, a career that I thought I was going to do my entire life, to transitioning to the unknown. And who knows if this is going to work out? Can you even teach yoga full-time? I don't know. And so so I decided to make the shift, and it was the scariest decision of my life. Like, I've always been one of those people that have done things by the books. I went into university right away from post-secondary. I never took any time off. I got a house. I did all of the things, right, that you think you're supposed to do by the books, but I wasn't happy. And so is that right? I don't know. So I went with my gut, did what I felt I needed to do, and it wasn't easy. It was a lot of struggle, a lot of eye-opening experiences, a lot of cutting back from the luxuries that I no longer had because the financials weren't there anymore. I went from a job with really, really good money to almost nothing. But I had to build kind of up back from ground zero, and I did. And now today, I am like, if you would have asked me 4 years ago if I could see myself where I am today, I would laugh. Like, there is absolutely no way. I didn't think that I could orchestrate the reality of my life to be what it is But looking back and going through all of these experiences and staying vulnerable and staying open to the possibility that there's always something more, really it's paid off. And now I'm in a position where I'm comfortable and I'm happy, and I couldn't imagine doing anything else with my life.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Do you believe in like manifesting things?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I for the longest time how do I say this without sounding like a snotty kid? I grew up I was very lucky to grow up in the family that I did. I was very fortunate. I wasn't handed everything that I wanted. My parents gave us chores. We still had to work for our allowances and do things, but we lived very comfortably, and we were given essentially not everything that we wanted, but what we wanted, we worked for and we got it. And so from that, and school came really easy to me too. And so high school, I should say, came really easy. So I didn't really have to work that hard when I was a kid. I was kind of a natural athlete. I was naturally gifted at school. It was just, things were easy. I was lucky. And then when I went and got into university, and that changed, and bell curves started to appear, and I was like, oh shit, I actually have to like apply myself here and do some stuff. That's when I was like, okay, the world doesn't owe me anything. The world doesn't revolve around me. If I want to get anywhere, I need to put the work in and do the time. So, and especially since I've switched over to this career path that I'm on now, being your own boss, like you have to hustle. You have to create those opportunities for yourself. And if you're not doing the work, and if you're not manifesting your intention or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, you're not going to get it. And that's, so you hear these people and it's like, good things come to those who wait, and it's, no, it doesn't. It's fucking bullshit.
Waiting.
No,
Stop waiting.
Good things come to those who work for it, right? Like, yeah, you might get lucky here and there once in a while, but if you want to make something happen, go and cultivate that shit on your own, right? Like, it's hard work and it's uncomfortable, and people don't want to put the work in, but the people that do and take the time to grind it out, those are the ones that see the benefits in the long run. And it might not happen overnight. It might not happen in a week, a month, or even a year. But if you really, really want something, and if you decide to put the time in and put the work in and the effort and the energy, it all comes back tenfold eventually, whether that's a year from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. It all comes back. So I'm a big believer in manifestation.
If you could like look into the future, maybe 1 year, maybe 5 years, like what are you trying to manifest for yourself in the future?
So it's been really interesting. So being on the kind of more Western medicine side throughout my kinesiology career, and doing everything by the books and having a lot of research-based evidence, which is great. I noticed that there's a big gap between Western medicine and then this whole kind of more holistic wellness side of things. And so a lot of the clients that I would see in my physio or my kinesiology career, you would hear a lot of the doctors and a lot of physiotherapists recommending that these clients go to yoga or do yoga, which is great. But then I would be at my yoga studio and I would be about to teach a hot yoga class, and you would see this guy limping in, and he'd be like, oh, and he just had a knee replacement, and he would say, oh, my doctor told me to come to yoga. Your doctor told you to come to a hot yoga flow class? I don't effing think so. So where I see myself, hopefully, is starting to eventually bridge the gap between the Western medicine doctor side of things and the teacher and the yoga teaching side of things, educating both doctors and instructors so that doctors know what kind of yoga that they should be recommending, as well as educating instructors to know, this person should not be in my yoga flow class, because a lot of other instructors that maybe don't necessarily have the same background or education that I do, that maybe don't know when to refer or when to recommend that a client go see somebody else out of just for safety reasons. So starting to bridge the gap for that, I think, is going to make the best care for that client, because when everybody's on the same page, then that's when care is the most optimal for any patient. So I would eventually like to do that. I'm actually in the works of building and going to be putting out with Empowered Yoga an applied physiology and pathology to yoga. So working with disease and disability So again, just kind of educating instructors a little bit more on how to work with different populations to make the practice more inclusive for everybody, because not everybody can make it to a yoga studio. Not everybody can do a flow class. Not everybody knows the modifications, and instructors included in that too. Again, it all comes back to you don't know what you don't know. And so if we can just educate people so that they can start to make those conscious decisions themselves, then I think that's going to reduce injury, increase health and wellness for students and practitioners. So I'd eventually like to begin to bridge that gap in the next few years as well. I'm hopefully going to be starting to work towards my yoga therapy certification, but that's quite a process in itself. So all in good time.
Do you know who Brandon Jacobs is?
I do know Brandon Jacobs. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good. So what inspired your trip to Central America?
So I was there last year, actually. I was in Costa Rica and Nicaragua as well. And it was just before so Nicaragua actually last March, the end of March, went through a political crisis. And so I was there 2 weeks before the crisis happened. And before that, Nicaragua was literally the safest country in Central America to go to. English is quite a barrier there. Not everybody speaks it, but it's fine. You do the best that you can, and everybody there is just, they're so caring and so kind and so helpful, and it was an amazing experience. I loved it. And so after the crisis happened, I was devastated. I honestly couldn't believe that could happen. And so I wanted to give back in some way. So I donated some money online, and I tried to do that, but it didn't do anything for me. I didn't know what else I could do. So I started looking around for organizations that were looking to kind of give back. And so that's when I found this surf camp that had the after school program with the kids. So so that was what fueled my trip, or my reasoning to go back. And going back, it was amazingly sad to see how much had changed in the short time. Because of the crisis, there's a big stigma now attached to the country that it's unsafe, and that you shouldn't go there, and that you should just go elsewhere. But really, the opposite couldn't be more true. It is, those people, even though they went through what they went through, things have calmed down now, and things are not necessarily back to normal, but they've kind of found their groove in all of this. The people are still just as friendly. They're still just as welcoming, but it's heartbreaking to see how many restaurants and shops and things have closed down. People have moved away. And so they're slowly rebuilding, but it's going to take time. But it also takes people like us to go there and to help out, and to see that, no, this is a safe place to go, and share that with others, so that they can hopefully have that same experience and get these people kind of back on their feet, because they really rely on tourism as one of their main industries, and without that, they don't have anything. And right now, they don't really have a lot of tourism, so a lot of these people are in worse situations than they were before, which is really, really sad. But
how did that trip shape the way that you run your business?
So when I got back from that trip, before I left for the trip, I was in a lot of different spaces around the city teaching. I was spread very, very thin, I'll admit that. And I thought I needed to be everywhere at once. I thought the more I could make myself available to as many people as possible, the better of a teacher I would be. And when I was on my trip, it was very humbling to see these people and the amount of love that they have for just the small group that they're around with what they have. And so it really kind of made me realize that you don't need to be everything to everybody. If you take a step back and dedicate your time and expend your energy in spaces that resonate with you and that mean something to you, because a lot of these spaces, not a lot, but some of the spaces I was teaching at, I didn't resonate with. It was a paycheck. It was easy, and it was my ego that I wanted to feed because I wanted to be popular. And so I took a step back when I came back from Central America from a few spaces, and really dedicated my time to the areas of my work that I wanted to and where I wanted to make a difference. And so since then, since I've decided to really channel my energy to where it needs to go, it's made such a big difference in my career. And not only do I find that I'm gaining even more opportunities, but I feel so much more grounded and connected internally than before, whereas I was rushing from this space to this space and just not even in a mindset. Essentially, I was just on autopilot. So it really, really kind of brought me back down to earth.
I like that. So you were a dancer when you were younger. What was the biggest challenge for that?
There was a lot of dance. So when I was a dancer growing up, like I did the small towns that I lived in, we were very restricted. Like there was no tap or even hip hop or anything like that. I did Ukrainian dance and I did ballet. So there wasn't a lot of challenges with that. I guess my biggest challenge was when I was when I was going into middle school and started playing volleyball. It was just making that decision.
Okay.
I grew up I grew up in a very big Ukrainian family, and so it was very like a sentimental thing to us. And so my biggest challenge was, I was like, well, do I let go of dance? And I didn't know if I was disappointing my family. I know now I wasn't, but at the time I thought, well, am I going to be disappointing my family if I quit dance to pursue volleyball? But I really like volleyball. Or do I continue dancing where I'm starting to not really resonate there anymore and just kind of off this? So the biggest challenge for me with my dance was just the decision to kind of let that go. And when I did, it was fine. I still enjoy going to the Shumka Nutcracker every Christmas, but other than that, yeah, there wasn't. I haven't danced since I was about 14 or 15, so it's been some time. But yeah, it was a really cool experience. I learned a lot about myself throughout that whole journey as well.
Well, I found it's a rocky road to navigate because so many people's body image problems are rooted from that, and it can be such a dark world, just about any sport or anything can be.
Oh, 100%.
Did you find that sort of anything from that contributed to the way that you showed up in life in the years since?
I don't know about if my dance had anything to do with that, but I remember specifically I had a lot of body image issues growing up and still struggle with that even to this day. I still have self-conscious about certain things, but I remember in grade 8, I was in swimming lesson. We were in swimming lessons in school, and we were all it was the first year that I was able to wear a bikini. My mom would let me wear a bikini to swimming lessons, and or a tankini, I think it was, those ones that come down. And it was before, well, I don't know, I wasn't a woman yet, but I remember looking around at the other girls, and I grew up, I was always one of those smaller kids. And I remember looking around, and I grabbed a part of my stomach, and the gym teacher said, you better enjoy this because this is the smallest that you're ever going to be. And I remember thinking but I'm already unhappy about this. What do you mean this is no, I can let go of this. And so since grade 8, ever since grade 8, I had this image or this idea in my head that I was big. And I wasn't. I was maybe this 95-pound kid. And but ever since then, that stuck with me. And so I always thought, no, this isn't the smallest I can be. I can be smaller than this. And so I had a lot of negative body image issues that stemmed around that. And the schooling that I went through helped me through it, but it was also detrimental at times for that. So it was a struggle that I that I battled with for quite a few years, and it's something that I still deal with to this day on a much healthier level now. I'm aware of it, but we all still have our self-conscious issues or insecurities from time to time. But it's learning to become aware of those, acknowledging those insecurities, and then just kind of letting them be or letting them go.
So it was a swim instructor that said that?
It was my gym teacher. My gym teacher, yeah.
How would you describe that gym teacher?
Nicely. She was how do I describe her? I don't want to say she was brutally herself. She told it like it was. I don't think she was accurate in a lot of the things that she said, because I don't know how you could say to any 13 or 14-year-old kid, this is the smallest you're ever going to be. And the tone in which she said it, I remember it vividly, was very condescending. And I just remember because she And not to knock on anybody's size or image at all, but she wasn't a Barbie doll either. And so I just, the comparison that came along with that. And so, and of course that, I'm assuming that had something to stem from an issue that she dealt with like maybe a long time ago. But just to project that onto these young teenage girls. And I remember myself thinking that, and then thinking, what are these other girls thinking as well? And I don't know, I never asked, but I can guarantee I wasn't the only one that carried along with.
Like, what the fuck is going through a person's head to say that when they're in that position of influence? Like, what do you think she thought of herself to be able to project that on other people?
I don't know. But then at the time, you have to think, like, this was what, like 15 years, like 10, 15, more than 10, like 15 years ago, right? So like the language that we used was a lot different, especially in the health and wellness community. Like people that were larger, we called them fat. We didn't like, and people that were skinny were called anorexic. Like we didn't use the correct language or terminology, and we didn't know what we didn't know. And I don't know if it was just because of that small town that I lived in, or just the lack of knowledge. But that I remember that stuck with me to this day.
Yeah, that kind of shit pisses me off.
Yeah, but you know what? Looking back and having gone through it, like now I don't want anybody else to ever have to go through that. Or if you ever hear a story like that, like knowing how it made me feel and the influence it had on me and all of these habits that stemmed because of that one comment, I feel empowered to hopefully instill change on other people that might be going through that, or have had somebody say something to them. And like the people that I work with, my private clients, my kinesiology clients, a lot of them are in sensitive situations, especially with the lack of mobility or whatever it may be. So for me, what I try to do each and every day with my clients, my students, is instilling a sense of empowerment to people, and to work with what they have and learn to love their bodies for what they are and what they can do, because our bodies are so much stronger and so much more capable than what we give ourselves credit for. But a lot of times we don't think that we can. We tell ourselves that we can't. We have these fears or these expectations that have been built up by ourselves or by what other people have said to us, that we're afraid of maybe falling or of looking bad or looking a certain way, that we avoid doing the things that make us happy, or doing things that will cause a change for the better. So what I try to do is I try to hold space for people where they can explore their comfort zone, as well as starting to take a step outside of that, so that they can prove to themselves that yes, they actually can. And hopefully from there they can start to realize the strength that they have and start to cultivate that on a deeper level.
And that kind of stuff is so much easier said than done.
Oh, 100%.
So like so many people, and especially in the fitness industry, in the wellness space, they have a lot of like looming self-doubt. They have negative self-talk. Like leaders in the industry, people running their business, like people who are like millionaires, whether it be a fitness business or non-fitness business, have this self-doubt, these demons, they're monkeys on their back, and they might not show it. But like I've talked to enough different people that like I can attest to the fact that everybody's battling it.
Oh yeah.
So what kind of tools should be in their toolbox to keep themselves solid?
I think the biggest thing, and so something that I've been doing a lot, I'm actually right now starting to build, I'll be facilitating some mindfulness workshops with Enbridge later on this month for their control center operators and some of their staff, which is really, really great because they're in high stress situations all the time. Their brains are always working, and they're almost always in that fight or flight state. And so my biggest thing that I can recommend to people is to just start paying attention to your body and when it's holding stress. We go through so much of our day in this go state that we don't even realize when our shoulders are clenched or our jaw is tight. That just the simple act of relaxing our jaw or dropping your tongue away from the roof of your mouth, dropping your shoulders down, can help release a lot of that unconscious or subconscious stress. So when we start to consciously pay attention, and it's a chore, just like when you work out to strengthen a muscle, by paying attention, you have to pay attention to your mind. And in order for yourself to grow and build mindfulness, you have to pay attention. So when we start to pay attention, that's when we can notice, okay, here I'm tight physically, or I'm clenching my jaw, or maybe I'm noticing that I'm really agitated right now. Why is that? And a lot of times when we can pause and when we consciously take a step back and take a breath, our breath might not help us to solve our problems, but it can help us to think a little bit more clearly rather than just kind of letting that word vomit come out. So what I like to do is, I just like to really try to encourage people to stop and take a step back, take a breath, notice what you're feeling, acknowledge it, and you might not need to accept it, but just knowing where you are in the present moment, not worrying about where you were 5 minutes ago or where you're going to be an hour from now. That can really help us to stay aware and to hopefully start to develop a little bit of mental clarity so that we can move through these uncomfortable situations.
So I feel like you must have used a mantra at some point in your life, am I right?
Mm-hmm.
So what would be your most bulletproof mantra? Something that you could use, but also somebody else would be able to use that would make them feel unstoppable in their moment of weakness?
So the mantra that I used actually when I was going down to Central America on the plane, because I was by myself, was I am brave. And so because I, for one, do not think I'm a brave person at all. I kept repeating that to myself over and over and over. And anytime I would start to not feel brave or start to feel scared, I would take out my travel journal and I would just write, I am brave. So I literally probably I could go upstairs and grab it, like 30 pages of just, I am brave, all down the pages. And it's funny, like people say you repeat that to yourself until it clicks. And I've repeated mantra and I've repeated that to myself before, but it wasn't until, I don't know, I just, something must have clicked, and eventually I started to believe it. And I was like, you know what? I am brave. I'm stronger than my fear. And yeah, I'm in an airplane and I'm not in control of the situation. And if we go down, we go down, but I am brave. And from that, I was able to develop a sense of calm and a sense of ease that I didn't necessarily have before. So I think that's one mantra that I like to use when I'm feeling uneasy. But I think a big one that everybody can use, especially when you're feeling weak, is just this most simplest mantra that we can use: I am enough. Because a lot of times we have these unrealistic expectations placed upon us, and we're always trying to multitask and we're always trying to do that we forget how important it is to take a step back and just exist. So when we remind ourselves that we are enough as we are, exactly as we are, I think that can be really, really powerful.
Yeah, I like that, but I'm going to challenge you to dive a bit deeper into what defines enough, because I see it in so many different spaces. I'm like, well, enough. Like, am I doing everything that I could by saying I am enough? Or is there something that I could believe in myself more to be like the true definition of enough? Like, dive deeper into what that is.
So I think that's really, really personal or very individualized for everybody. Like, what is your definition of enough? For me, my feeling of enough is just learning to be okay with where I am, whether maybe it's a good space, maybe I've had a really, really good day, and okay, this is enough. I don't need to do anything more because I've already done all of this. I'm happy where I am. But also sometimes being enough is not having a good day and realizing it's okay not to have a good day. You don't need to do any more work to try and have a good day. You don't need to be productive. You don't need to always be grinding. Sometimes taking a step back and resting and this concept of recovery, it's equally as important as the grind that we put ourselves through. To have too much of one without the other causes an imbalance. And so I think learning to have a good balance between rest and the hustle and just learning to accept where you are in any moment, whether you're in a positive mindset or maybe not so positive of a mindset. To me, that's enough. And it's not feeling the need to do any more than what you've already done.
I like that. And to broaden that point, I'll offer my perspective of enough. So for me, I like to always strive for something more. But the parameters of that are what I would say is enough. So to like clarify there, if I am like trying to meet other people's expectations, then that is further from what is enough for me. Like I'd much prefer to meet my expectations for myself, like meet my vision for myself and see that as being enough. Because sometimes like some people are in the pursuit of wealth over integrity, and some people are in the pursuit of integrity over wealth. And I honestly believe that no matter how slow going it looks, like integrity first, people first, is just the better route to go. So for me, like I might live on the edge as a trainer. Like I charge session by session instead of charging for like 6-month, 1-year packages. And that's scary, and a lot of people shake their head at me, but that is what enough looks like to me, because I hold on to something that is most dear to me, which is my integrity. I want to hold on to that like my most prized possession. And some people might think like, because I spend a lot of time with people, but like for a very specific reason, because I think it's good for my wellness. I think it's good to like build on that, because I think that social media and our connectedness through our devices is taking away from like that like personal growth and that like wellness that we get from interacting with people. Like I believe energy is a thing. And I think so many people are getting further and further away from that. And they might see me as not pursuing something monetary, but instead pursuing just people and connections. Then they might think that's not enough, but I think that me on the pursuit of people is enough.
Yeah, and it all comes down, I think, to kind of that intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, right? Like what drives you and what motivates you to do what you do? Like what's your intention? When you ask people what their intention is, a lot of times people can't give you an answer, and it's like, well then why are you doing what you're doing? Like what is it? What drives you? And if you can't answer that, then maybe you need to rethink what it is that you're doing. And so if you can answer that, if you maybe you are financially motivated, maybe there's something that you're really working towards, by all means give it a go. If that's your answer, if that's your why, then give her. But if you're motivated by those intrinsic factors, whether that be connection through conversation or what have you, to me personally, that is more fulfilling than any number my bank account could ever say. So it all comes down to what motivates and what drives you as an individual. Where do you want to go?
Totally. Who are 3 people that you look up to in the world?
Number 1 would be my dad. I really look up to my dad. He is hands down the hardest working, kindest, most empathetic, selfless man I've ever met. He is absolutely incredible. Like I'm my father's daughter, and I think I am lucky that I have grown up to be like him in so many ways. And so I could not thank him more for the upbringing that I had, and my mom as well. Like I know it's really, really kind of cliche, and it's kind of those run-of-the-mill answers, but you know what, like, and my mom, like my parents, they just celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary this year. We just had a big surprise party for them a couple of weeks ago, which was fantastic. But just the dynamic that I grew up in my home life as a kid, and my mom, and just seeing how, like, my dad is this very, very scheduled, very regimented, very organized guy, and my mom is just this free spirit and laid back and very outgoing, and so they're just a really good balance of each other. So I think I have a lot of my qualities, and I know I've gained a lot of my values from both of my parents, and so they were really, really big influencers in my life. And then Somebody else that I really, really look up to and I really admire her work is Brene Brown. Her writing about vulnerability and her talks about courage and showing up is just, for me, I think when I found her, it was what I needed to hear at the time. I always thought being vulnerable was associated with weakness, and it couldn't be further from the truth. And so when I read her books and saw her perspective and learned that it's okay not to be okay, it's okay to show up, and it's okay to make mistakes, I really grew, and I think I changed a lot for the better because of her. So I really look up to her. I always follow along with what she has going on. And so I think, yeah, for me right now, those are three of the biggest influential people.
That's awesome. I like that answer. And everybody always says cliche to like shout out their parents, but like that's important.
Well, it is, and I'm very lucky. Like, not everybody has a great relationship with their parents, or maybe their parents weren't around, and so I'm very fortunate to have my parents still very close to me and still so in love with each other as they are. Like, it's just. It was a great dynamic that I got to grow up in, and so I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for them.
Yeah, like a question like this, there's honestly no wrong answer.
Yeah.
I think some people go into it like, oh, well, I got to think hard on this. Like, I really got to overthink this because there's a wrong answer. It's like, no, like, you could, honestly, if somebody values Cookie Monster and they can, like, describe why,
right?
Then I'm going to think that's really cool.
Yeah.
And it's going on the podcast. And, like, that's how I'm going to know more about them. But, like, I hope that, well, I don't know, maybe somebody really does value Cookie Monster.
Maybe.
When I was a baby, my first word was cookie.
Oh, really?
And I'm pretty sure my second word was monster. But, like, so that could have been the heavy influence of Sesame Street books and stuff like that.
Gotta love the 90s, hey?
Absolutely. So, the last question that I have for you, which I ask all of my guests, and you said you were prepared for this one, so here goes nothing. If you had one piece of advice on how to live your life authentically to the fullest, what would that piece of advice be?
My piece of advice to live your life to the fullest would be to learn to say no, and to learn to love yourself in a way that you would a loved one, a family member, your spouse, your child, your dog, whatever. We get so negative on ourselves, and our inner critic tends to take over, that we get so caught up in this negative mindset, and from there these patterns and these habitual ways just stem, and we find ourselves in this downward spiral. But when we stop and take a step back and start to pay attention and learn to speak to ourselves in the same way that we would a loved one, then from there our whole world begins to shift, and our mindset begins to change as we open up. And part of that though is learning to say no and setting healthy boundaries so that you can give yourself the space to grow. So say no, do you, and live your life for yourself, because if you're not living your life for yourself, then who are you living it for?
Yep, I agree. That's a good one. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. It was a pleasure.
It was awesome. See you around. Thanks for listening. As always, I'm always going to remind you to check out episodes of people both locally and not local that you know and that you don't know. Because honestly, it can be a famous person, it can be a not famous person, it can be a person you've heard of, it can be a person you didn't hear of. You're going to learn something new. It's really important to be able to put yourself in other people's shoes, learn from other people's life experiences, and honestly, I can speak on my biased opinion that there are a lot of people that are quite cool that have been on the podcast, and I'd love it if you wanted to learn more about them as much as I do. So thank you for supporting me, and looking forward to bringing you the next episode.